episode of Rock Talk with the DocRocker. Danton Arlotto, what are we talking about today? Who do we have in the Zoom space with us? What's going on?
Who's in our presence?
Yeah, so this episode we are talking about thrash metal and all of its various sublets and subgenres therein. So again, we're welcoming back one of our guests from our glam metal episode, the one and only JP Abstract Art, Jeremy Petrachonis. So Jeremy, let's throw the ball right to you. How do you want to start this? Are we going right into the big four, or are we going to go into maybe some lesser known stuff? What would you like to talk about today?
Oh shit. As much as the big four is very, very just on point, it's going to get there. Of course, we got to talk about the big four. I think we should talk about a band called Motorhead, especially a man known as Lemmy. It's because I'm wearing his t-shirt
Yeah.
from the Rainbow Bar and Grill.
How about the Rainbow Bar and Grill? Before we started filming this episode, you were talking a little bit about that. Let's tell the audience a little more about what you could find there.
So the Rainbow Bar and Grill is essentially the rock and roll hotspot of the Hollywood Strip. So if you want to be in a place where many famous bands, people, whatever, the scenes over the years always went to, it was the Rainbow Bar and Grill. They shot American Satan there, which is a new modern classic about really just kind of like selling your soul to rock and roll, kind of like that. And you know, you can find so many people there. When I went to exhibit in Los Angeles, I was really hoping I'd see Slash upstairs shooting pool, because that's one of the rumors you hear, and it happens a lot, you know, from Dave Grohl, Slash, like all these people always go to the Rainbow. And when you go in there, it's filled with memorabilia, photos, everything from rock and roll from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even like the earlier days too. Here and there, you'll see it. And outside, which is where I got this t-shirt from, it's now known as Lemmy's Lounge, because Lemmy would always be at the Rainbow playing his machine. So you could see the machine he played on, because they now have it permanently reserved for him. Outside, they have the golden statue, which is the icon kind of thing on my shirt. You know, they got a whole Motorhead theme thing. They got menu items about him. You can get the Lemmy drink, just 7/8 Jack and a little bit of Coke. They got a mural there for Lemmy. So it's really just the rock and roll central point of the Hollywood Strip. That is essentially the Rainbow. And that was Lemmy's spot. And Lemmy is the fucking man. And of course, we'll be talking about that in this podcast, because honestly, without him, I don't know how thrash really would have got off the floor to the big four, to be honest with you.
I don't think thrash would exist without Motorhead. Absolutely. You're absolutely
exactly.
Right. Yeah, Motorhead's first album came out in 1977. By the time 1980 came around with Ace of Spades, I mean, that's a thrash song. You know, that's...
Yep.
In every word, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, another proto-thrash song, I'll call it, like Queen's Stone Cold Crazy back in 1974. Metallica covered it. You know, Exciter by Judas Priest is another one that gets tossed around as like the songs that kind of formed into that style. Before we go any further, though, let's talk about what thrash metal is. What is it to you? Because I know to me it means aggression, fast-paced tempos, shredding guitar. Vocals are usually similar to like a hardcore band, stuff like that. What does it mean to you guys?
Well, if I can go first, I'd say, you know, now knowing where music went, I mean, it would definitely be a different kind of thing if it was in the 90s and 80s we had this conversation. But, you know, in 2020 perspective for it, I would say it's a step below hardcore music that started over in Boston and everything like that. It's not too far below like deathcore and like crazy kind of stuff, because it's just, like you said, fast tempo, shredding guitars, aggression, violence, just everything all at once, and it comes together in such a beautiful way. I think that's how I would sum up thrash metal, especially with the big four, Motorhead, you know, so many bands, even to today with Power Trip, you know, God rest Riley's soul. You know, it always kept the same kind of groove no matter how far it went. And we're about like 35 years into like the whole thrash takeover, I'd say. So I'd say it's definitely going to keep the same kind of tempo, pacing, and everything it's always had, which is great. It's nostalgic, and I'm pretty stoked because I feel like thrash, along with glam metal and everything else, and new metal, could easily be on the horizon within maybe the next 5 years of breaking through again to the mainstream. So it's interesting. We might have a revival of it. We already kind of have.
There's a lot of old thrash bands that have released some really good stuff in the last year. Testament. Last few albums have been great. Megadeth. Total return to form with Dystopia. Anthrax last 2 albums were fantastic.
Metallica really hit it big. Well, that was a little bit ago, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, what's going on now? Even Sepultura is coming out with a new album too. I'm not sure what it's going to sound like, but Sanctuary was one of my favorite thrash bands that are pretty obscure from the 80s. They actually became more popular in the 90s as Nevermore. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nevermore.
Oh, yeah. I know Nevermore. I was going to say, yeah, I know Nevermore. That's interesting how that worked out.
Yeah. God rest his soul, because Warrell Dane is not with us anymore. He passed away day before my birthday, like 3 years ago.
Man.
He was one of those guys, man, that he has a unique voice, but Sanctuary they were a thrash band. You listen to something like Battle Angels or Die for My Sins, that's a thrash band. And they never got their due really in the 80s and into the 90s until they became Nevermore. But let's talk about the big four. Why don't we start there? Like, the big four, for everyone that doesn't know, is Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer.
Man.
They're the big four.
If people don't know who the big four are, I'd be like, oh man, there's the door.
Are you watching then, right?
Yeah, the big four is like, it's sad because there are people that don't know who the big four are, and it's like literally going on 40 years practically that the big four has been solidified. The big 440, but God damn that. And I gotta say, that concert when they first had their first meeting, I mean, I eventually will pay however much money someone wants for a Blu-ray copy of the first big four at Sonosphere. I think right now it's at $45. Eventually I will pay whatever the fuck it is, because that concert was absolutely incredible. But yeah, those bands practically started around the same time, I'd say, and it kind of broke out. I mean, yeah, some started before others, and some had more success through tape trading and really just, I guess, hitting the groove and hitting the mainstream, trying to get there. But every band in the big four means something. I mean, you said Dystopia from Megadeth was a return. It really was. Metallica on their last album was a return to their roots. Slayer is just Slayer, and Anthrax has really been kicking ass, but Slayer always stays the same. I've seen Slayer, God, like probably 8 times live. Ironically, they were just on the bill for other bands I wanted to see, and then they headlined like 2 festivals I was at. So I was like, yeah, fucking Slayer, and everyone's losing their minds. But I guess Slayer never really changed when you think about it. I mean, I know the God Hates Us All album was a very interesting album because it came out on the day that 9/11 happened. But yeah, Slayer kind of always kept it till the very end. And I mean, Jeff Hanneman unfortunately died, and Gary Holt subbed in. Exodus was another great band of that era, but yeah. It's just crazy how it kind of just all works. But yeah, Slayer always kind of kept it, and the other 3 bands kind of transitioned here and there all over the place, and it's interesting. I mean, Anthrax even toured and did songs with Killswitch Engage, so it's like you can kind of see like a modernality to what they were doing to what they're doing now, and they're trying to help other bands in the future. So it's just really interesting. I mean, Metallica just did SMM2, and so it's like kind of returning to where they were, but kind of in the future at the same time to where it's going. So it's a very interesting genre, really, to tell you the truth.
It is. It's I really enjoy a lot of thrash, and like, I'm a big Maiden fan, like I said, and so that's like my top band, But the next thing I like, next style, I like a lot of thrash bands, and so I'm gonna pose this question now to you two. If the big four is Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, who's number 5?
Ooh, that's interesting. And we recently posted about that. Jeff made a post, and we had a bunch of people comment. So some really good contenders. I know Testament was a name that came up quite a bit. What do you think, Jeremy?
if there had to be a big five just due to like when the big four happened and just where thrash kind of went around that time, if there was a big five, I think Testament would be right there, because when you hear and you think of thrash metal and the roots of thrash metal, you hear the big four, and then the other band you hear is Testament. And I kind of just, I don't know how the big four really started with people going the big four, but if it had to be a big five, I'd say Testament is probably the tail end of that. If we had to say there's a big five, I think Testament would be the band.
Well, hey, to be perfectly honest, I'm not really super into thrash metal. It's not a genre I know all that well. I mean, I just recently started getting really into Megadeth because, like I said, I saw them live and was really impressed. And then just a couple weeks ago, I listened to Rust in Peace for the first time straight through and was totally floored by it, cover to cover. I went through it twice, and I plan to go through a lot more of that. I've always kind of dabbled with some of Metallica stuff. When I first started getting into metal, it's like, oh, you're a metal guy, you got to listen to Metallica. So I picked up And Justice for All. I picked up Ride the Lightning. I got Death Magnetic when it dropped. I think it was like 2010, 2008.
That was actually that was 2008, because that was a year before their Guitar Hero game, because they had that ported into it. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, 2008, because I was a sophomore.
When Death Magnetic came out, I was really, really impressed by that album. That's probably my favorite Metallica album, which might be controversial to a lot of like hardcore Metallica fans.
But like I said, fucking great album.
Going back to like the big four, though, for me, it's one of those things where like kind of every metalhead, even a guy like me that's not into thrash, at least knows who they are. Like, you know, at least I know that Slayer is one of them. I know that it's Metallica and Megadeth, and they're tied together at the hip for a whole bunch of different reasons, and that's subject for another episode. But for me, like the big surprise was Anthrax, because my only exposure to them, those of you that have been watching, we briefly touched on them in the new metal episode, because they have that one tune where they collab.
Bring the Noise.
Yeah, Bring the Noise, where they did that collab.
Dude,
and like,
I never knew. Tony Hawk too.
Yeah, well, Tony Hawk is another topic, because the music in that game, there's so much different kinds of, you know, not even just metal and rock, but there's like a whole slew of different genres really well represented in that game's soundtracks. Not even just the second game, but the first game had a lot of bangers on it, 3 and 4, the list goes on. But we're not here to talk about Tony Hawk.
And Thrash. They've had some thrash bands in there too.
They have.
It just misses, like Tony Hawk always took just everything and just compressed it in, you know?
For me, I never knew Anthrax was a thrash band. And since I knew that there was the inevitable day that we would be doing thrash on this episode, I went through and I checked out the two guys that I really don't know at all. So I spent an entire day and a half on Spotify just going through Slayer. Just give me whatever. And it rotated from album to album. I got a couple off of God Hates Us All. I don't remember the names of the other albums. I was checking them as I was listening to see like, what song is this? What album was it on? And just getting a better idea of what they sound like. And I did the same thing for Anthrax.
Rain and Blood.
Yeah, that was one of them.
Guitar Hero 3, everyone knows that song, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let me give you the reason why I say Testament should be number 5, because I do have a reason. There's a big reason for this. You know, because a lot of people said Exodus, a lot of people said Overkill, definitely Creator. They were the big ones on the Facebook group. A lot of people say
exactly.
Yeah, but I say Testament because when most of these thrash bands went kind of soft in the mid '90s, like.
That's when it was still right there, right?
They went a little different, changed a little bit. Metallica went real soft. Even Megadeth with Risk and those albums, they're kind of so-so. Anthrax, they had a slew of different singers. So the big four was kind of like, you know, a little disjointed in the mid-'90s. Mm-hmm. Testament released 2 albums in the 90s that were probably the heaviest things they've ever done. Low and The Gathering. The Gathering has some stuff that's almost like death metal on it. They're really, really heavy albums. Plus, and this is the big one, neither cancer nor the coronavirus could kill Chuck Billy, the singer from Testament. He's just too metal. So that's why they're number 4.
That's
Chuck Billy, man, the fucking legend. I mean, I've seen Testament. I have not seen the big 4 in one concert. I've seen the big 3 because Metallica wasn't there. But then you had Slipknot and you had Motorhead. So it was kind of like you saw the big ones, but
definitely excusable for like that being a full-blown thrash show for sure.
Yeah. I just I think it's fucking crazy because like when I saw Motorhead, you know, they're clocked as the loudest band on the fucking earth, and I could see why. I'm like, let me just be sitting there. You guys want it louder. You want it louder.
And of course, every answer was always unanimously yes. I would
just kept getting louder. I was like, "Holy fuck!" It's crazy.
Back up until where Lemmy got sick, he was on like every possible tour there was. Like you could throw a stone somewhere and just hit a Motorhead show. And so much. I saw him a couple times when I was younger, but towards the end of his life, I saw him like probably 5 times in the summer. It was great.
Nice.
They were everywhere. They seriously were. And, you know, to this day, there's one really stupid comparison that goes around with modern day kids and the people that know real full-on music and were a transition. So, you know, when Lemmy died, you know, he played his last set and he was like on his fucking deathbed, played for 3 hours. And then Kanye West comes out of nowhere and goes, yeah, he's like, I'm a rock and roll god. And like, people somehow die on that hill. Like, they'll say that Kanye West is a rock and roll god, and I'm like, no. And then I show him a photo of like Lemmy playing his last fucking set. This is a rock and roll god. And you know, then his last commercial was him with the, I'm not sure if you guys saw it. It was I think a German milk commercial. He like walks out of a store with his little walker, and he goes, I never drank milk, and I never will. You it's like, you fucking asshole. It's like, oh shit. And he just, you know, Lemmy was Lemmy. So it's like when people Kanye West is a rock god, it's like, I don't think so, bro. I don't think so at all.
You can't spell poser with bigger capital letters than with Kanye, really.
I know.
Another comparison I always like between him and like rock icons, there's a really nice bit of there's like a famous quote by Jimi Hendrix, and it has like a picture of him, and then it has the quote, and it says, you know, like, I don't really like to receive compliments on my playing from fans. I find them really distracting, and they get in my way of being creative. And then right underneath it, it's Kanye West, and it says, I'm a creative genius. There's no other way to say it. It's like, that's the perfect representation of what Kanye is. And for all you Kanye fans, if you're into it, all power
you have to tell people.
If
you have to tell people you're a creative genius, you're not. Come on. Jeremy, you've probably seen the movie already, but the Lemmy documentary,
it's so fantastic. Fucking good.
Anyone that hasn't seen it yet, watch it. It is amazing. He is who he is. The character of Lemmy is exactly who he is, though. There's no character. He is who he is.
That's the most rock and roll thing I've ever heard. You know, just putting yourself out there and being yourself.
It really is.
So much of the essence, and not even just within thrash metal or even just within metal in general, but that's kind of a really good mantra by which to go as a musician and as an artist, you know, to really just wear your heart on your sleeve and go out there being who you are, and trust that in time your natural following will come, and you will see success as long as you stick with it.
I mean, that's kind of been like the story of my art career, to be honest with you, because I first started, and obviously it's the underground scene, so people aren't really looking at it as much. But obviously, from talking about music like thrash metal and everything, that started in the underground too, and look
and it
where
took
it went.
years until it really escalated to the worldwide phenomenon. Right?
Right around
saying it started as early
as
it's all paying off, you know? 75, and then it wasn't until like the 80s where like we really have the big four in their heyday. So it's really like a decade, the better part of a decade.
So you just gotta stick with it and
your sales.
1990 Clash of the Titans tour was when thrash metal was really on top. That tour was fantastic, and then, you know, from there that's kind of where it kind of peaked. Resurfaced back in 2010 with the Big Four tour, and it's been, I think, just kind of the ball's been rolling, you know, for the last 10 years, more and more and more, because everything that's in the last 10 years has been coming out. It's just been better and better and better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's better than being fake, you know? At least you're honest and not too fake.
In a complete contrast to some of the stuff we just talked about in our previous episode on glam metal, how some of those bands kind of kowtowed to some of the trends and fads going on into the transition in mainstream 90s music, which, that's, you know, you could call them sellouts or whatever, or you could argue that like that was a contribution to their success, and it's why some of those bands have stuck around as long as they have and why they're still relevant. But it brings me a lot of joy to like really see kind of both ends of that spectrum of like, going through changes and making adjustments to your art to accommodate and to grow your fan base, whether you get hate for that or not, and sticking to your core of what you like to produce and what you like to create, and let the haters be the haters if they want to stick with that as well. And that's what I really like about all these different genres. You know, there's kind of reasons to like and dislike all of it, and I always look for the stuff to like. That's just me. So,
well, can I mention a few Big Four albums that I think everyone should hear?
Sure.
One
Yeah,
for-
what
one for
are the
me.
definitive thrash metal
To me.
albums for someone like
To
me
me.
who doesn't know anything about thrash?
This is gonna be good.
Okay, now this
I'm ready
is
for
just
this.
my opinion. My opinion. Okay, I'm gonna start with Metallica.
Okay.
The definitive thrash album for me, for Metallica, is Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
Still raw. The songs are more complex and better written than Kill 'Em All. They have more of an identity on that album, and they're not just copying like what they heard from the new wave of British heavy metal on that album. James is singing still higher, kind of almost screaming like most thrash bands do. Now, Master of Puppets is a better sounding record. That's produced way better. But
Exactly.
Ride the Lightning, because I like the songs better there. It's raw. It's what Metallica was back then, and that's for me. That's the definitive thrash album for Metallica. Megadeth, of course, rest in peace. I've been singing praises of this album for years. It's progressive. It's aggressive. It has Megadeth's best lineup. Every song sounds different, and I say Holy Wars is the ultimate thrash song.
Okay.
Next up, Anthrax, Among the Living. I Am the Law, Caught the Mosh, NFL, great riffing, amazing drumming by Charlie Benante. Great vocals. Joey Belladonna is one of the best. He has more of like a power metal vocal. You know, he's like, he could sing Journey, you know.
Yeah.
He's a great vocal. They got some mid-paced tunes on there like Indians. You know, the band can kind of sound kind of goofy sometimes and lighthearted, and sometimes be serious and dark. Among the Living, to me, is a perfect balance of both sides of Anthrax.
Okay.
Then they went off to do I'm the Man and, you know, other stuff like that. But Anthrax, Among the Living, solid album. Next one, a little controversial maybe. Slayer, Seasons in the Abyss. May not be the most popular choice. But some will say Rain and Blood. Some will say, you know, Hell Awaits. But for me, Seasons is produced really great. War Ensemble. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
It's probably the most well-rounded Slayer album. I like Seasons of the Abyss. To me, that's their thrash album for me. So there's their big four.
Their classic.
Yeah, to me, that's their classic. That's the classic, big four classic albums right there. Ride the Lightning, Rest in Peace, Among the Living, and Seasons in the Abyss.
Yeah. Jeremy, what about you? If you had to pick one album from each of those bands that were like the definitive thrash experience, you know, let's say you meet someone and you're like, oh, I'm into thrash metal. And they're like, well, what's that? What do you hit them with?
You know, I'd practically go with the same choice as Jeff made.
Okay.
I'd lean more on Master of Puppets because that's really what made me like the fiber of my beings. But I love Ride the Lightning too. So that's probably the only difference. I mean, other than that, you know,
I think it's whatever you hear first. Whatever album you hear first. Because I heard Ride the Lightning first. You know, that was my first introduction to Metallica, and yours was probably Master. So
it was Master.
Yeah.
So then from Master, I went to Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All. And then obviously the Black Album was already prominently there, but, you know, they kind of went away from thrash full on with what people expected and more mainstream, but they made a fucking killing, made some damn good songs too. Still going great to this day. But yeah, I'd say it's all just the same exact choices. I mean, Among the Living, Rest in Peace. Seasons in the Abyss, I'd probably pick. It's been a while since I heard a Slayer record top to fucking bottom, but I'd say probably Seasons in the Abyss because that's kind of right at the midway of where it was because they all kind of changed at some point. Like Among the Living was Anthrax's milestone. Seasons in the Abyss seemed like Slayer's. Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets was like the tipping point for Metallica with Fame. And, you know, it's just kind of just the same thing. And Rest in Peace really was that catalog for Megadeth, and the original lineup was just fucking incredible. I'd love to see him again. Obviously, I think the drummer died, didn't he?
Yeah, Nick Menza passed away. Yeah,
didn't he have like a heart attack on stage? It was crazy.
Yeah.
He
man,
died.
really?
And then Marty just doesn't want shit to do with the band anymore. And I mean,
he's living in Japan. He's a millionaire in Japan. Why would he come back to Megadeth?
Exactly. And Risk all started because Dave wanted to keep Marty in the band, and we all know where Risk went. But it's just that really was a risk. But you know, so I'd recommend the same four. Really, to be honest, I mean, it really just depends on which, like he said, which album you heard first. Because once you hear the first album.
Yeah.
You immediately have those
there's definitely that nostalgia factor.
Nostalgia, you know. So
Ride the Lightning
and Master is great, you know. They're both
Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets they're the same. They're just as good as each other, I think.
It's just the production levels were bigger, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's what got like that got me into Metallica. Like when I heard Creeping Death, I was like, oh my god,
right.
You could read the lyrics to your priest if you wanted to, because it's
so good,
Jeff,
right?
Are you speaking from personal experience? Have you ever read the lyrics?
No, not our priest. He didn't like me. He beat me up. You know that story.
I do know that story. And we both have some really interesting stories about priests that we could share at some point when
we'll leave that go for now.
Metal and how they were constantly going toe to toe, and that could be a really interesting and kind of dicey topic. But yeah,
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. Yeah, we got tons of ground to cover, and we got tons of time to do so. Especially the longer this COVID thing drags on, we're just going to be shooting podcasts. Here we go.
Oh, I know, right? Got a good year.
What else are we going to do with our time?
Let's do it.
We talked about like classic thrash bands. What about some new bands, new thrash bands? Hit me up. I want to know. I want to hear some new thrash.
Power Trip.
Yeah. Power Trip. I don't think I've ever heard them.
So
when unfortunately, their vocalist just died.
Recently?
So it's sad. Yeah, he died within the past month.
Was it COVID?
I heard it might have been overdose or something, but yeah, Riley died. Power Trip's a great fucking modern band, though. That would be the band of today, definitely in thrash.
When did they form?
God, they formed, I'd say probably the late 2000s, maybe. Started just doing it, and up to today, they became one of like the renowned thrash bands, and then that happened, Riley was like 35 years old. So, I don't know too much about Power Trip, but like if I had to think of like one modern thrash band, that would be the band to check out, would be Power Trip.
So mainly it's the old guard coming back and doing some new stuff that's really, really good. Testament's new album is fantastic. Like I said before, if you guys haven't checked out anything by Metal Church, their last two albums have been great. They got their one of their old singers back, not their original one, but the one from the bigger albums they did in the 80s. Metal Church, fantastic. I know, Danton, you saw them.
I saw them live, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, they're a great band. They're thrashy. They have thrashy elements. They're not really a thrash band, I don't think. Going old school again, Nuclear Assault. They were cool. They were cool.
Mayhem. Bands.
Death Angel was a bunch. Yep. Death Angel started when they were like 15, 16 years old. Check out their albums. Their first three albums, Ultra Violence. Can't remember the other one. Act 3 is a really good one. Like I mentioned Sepultura before. I'm missing a few, but whatever. It's my old age. I can't think right now.
That's for all you. Let us know in the comments what other artists and albums you check out.
What are we missing here?
We got that countdown.
Whether you post
it in the last 10.
Or you go onto the Rock Talk with DocRocker Facebook page and jump in and give some comments and share what stuff you love.
Exactly.
We're always looking for stuff. Those of you watching me, I'm sitting here I'm here taking notes. I'm sitting here writing all this stuff down because I'm going to listen to as much of it as I can.
Now we didn't talk about what we're listening to this week though, because we wanted to start doing that. Like, what's your pick of the week? What have you been listening to? I'll tell you right now. I had to do some research for the glam rock hair metal thing, so I revisited all Cinderella, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue. I've been listening to all kinds of stuff like that for the last week or so. What about you guys?
Tell you the truth, recently MGK put out a new album and I got it signed, which was amazing. It's called Tickets to My Downfall. It's a pop punk album, but
very cool.
It's pretty fucking awesome. Other than that, to tell you the truth, I think the music I've been listening to is probably mainly parodies, which are really damn good, and probably the music from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. It's always blaring.
I actually there's a lot of new music on that soundtrack too. They threw in just enough like new tracks that are from the next generation of skaters, which is really cool. All that stuff just fits so seamlessly into the old stuff.
And I can't wait for 3 and 4.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I really think it's gonna happen too. They're already talking about doing it. So.
Oh, exactly. And the Underground series, I'm gonna shit my pants when that comes out.
You can't go wrong with
especially on PS5. But recently, when I was in Syracuse, there's a CD place I always like to go to. It's called the Soundgarden. And this time when I went, I actually got 311 greatest hits from 93 to 2003. So basically the golden era of 311 that everybody knows. After that, they kind of went to shit, but that's just my opinion. And I picked up the Nirvana famous compilation album from 2002 that has You Know You're Right on it. and I only got them both for $10 fucking. So
Nice.
That was some new stuff in my own collection. But
solid.
Yeah, it's definitely been going. So it's been a rocking week. Deals, traveling, trying to just do stuff with COVID, but
yeah. We're all scrapping here, trying to do our thing.
Exactly, right.
For me, a lot of my listening is usually retroactive. So like when I listen to a whole bunch of new metal stuff after we film the new metal episodes. So like I kind of like I use the podcast episodes as more of a learning experience for me, and it's kind of like a recon mission. And then it's like, all right, I kind of get this nice little list of here's stuff in that genre that I should check out. So last week we did a real brief foray into prog rock, which is a really big genre for me. A lot of my favorite bands are kind of right in that camp. So, and there were a bunch of different names of groups that got thrown out during that episode that it's like, oh yeah, I never checked those guys out. Oh yeah, I never checked those guys. The big one for me this week was Spock's Beard.
Yeah,
that was a band I heard of a million times and just never checked them out because I'm an idiot and I'm kicking myself so hard in the butt right now because I just found on Spotify, it was the first song that popped up. It was the opening track on their 2013 record. It's the most recent that they did. I forget the name of it. Something about like beneath like Sleepless Dreams or something like that. It's some kind of thing about like consciousness or whatever. I think it's a concept album. I listened to the whole thing 2 or 3 times trying to put all the pieces together. The opening track is called Holding On, I think. And like I was 30 seconds into it and I was just completely like, this is like one of my new favorite bands of all time. So I went from like, I was just going to shuffle a couple of random Spock's Beard tunes from like whatever's their, well-known stuff and then move on to something else. I never got to move on to something else. I ended up just doing that whole album cover to cover multiple times and fell in love with it. And I plan to check out the rest of the discography. I did another album. I went back. It's not their oldest album ever, but it's the oldest album that they feature on Spotify because that's just my go-to way for accessing new music. It's just whatever's on there. So I checked that out. That album, it was a lot longer in nature. That one was definitely a concept album. I forget the name of it. So those of you tuning in, let us know. But I listened to that one, and it had some moments that were like real good and proggy that I really liked. It also had some other moments that were a little more laid back that I didn't care for as much as like the newest album. So I'm looking forward to kind of covering the gap in between. And I'm going to go through all their stuff probably before I move on to anything else. So next week, I'll probably still be listening to Spock's Beard because they absolutely floored me. And I totally fell in love with them. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. And any of you guys that are into progressive rock or art rock or any of that sort of stuff, check them out if you haven't. They're on Spotify. They got some great albums. And it's really cool stuff, man. It's off the wall. It's really, really cool. Yeah, cool. I think that pretty much wraps it up, gentlemen. So that's our first of probably many episodes on Thrash. We're probably going to do like a whole bit on like Metallica versus Megadeth. We're going to do
that's going to be a good one.
There's going to be an interesting set of episodes that we're going to do kind of like my hot takes because there's a lot of like really famous stuff out there that I'm really not into. So we're going to do some of those, and Slayer is one of them. Sorry, Jeremy. They're not my favorite.
It's okay. I totally get it. After a while, they sound the same, so it's all good. I got you.
So, like the ADHD for me is like I'm ready for something else after 2 songs. So I'm not big on Slayer, so that could be something interesting we could talk about in the future. And plus, not to mention all of the unmentioned thrash bands that are out there, and even getting more into the history of how it developed and stylistic comparisons between thrash and other genres. So there's a lot we can circle back to. I feel like we're gonna do like a good kind of genre romp for the first several weeks of this kind of fledgling season of the podcast until we kind of get some bearing here, and then we're definitely going to be able to come back to some of these topics and revisit them again in the future, whether it be with some of our same guests or
that's going to be good.
Maybe by then we can even branch out and have some other people jump in and share their thoughts on the show. Especially now looking at our Facebook group as of the end of September 2020, like it's growing pretty fast, and I know Jeff and I are both very, very excited about that because we just decided to start shooting this just for fun, just for the hell of it, and it launched into something pretty big already. So it's a really nice surprise. So
exactly. Hey, I'm definitely down to be back on.
Keep on thrashing. Jeremy, thank you so much for being a special guest for us and coming in and sharing your stuff. It's been great. Again, those of you that have tuned in since our last airing of Glam Metal, check out JP Abstract Art. He's got his own website. You can see all of his stuff on there. Check him out. And,
same with Instagram, you name it, it's all there.
Yeah, check him out on social.
But whatever.
Yeah, you can do the same thing. DocRocker's all over social, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I'm sure, Jeremy, you're on even more platforms than me in that regard. So tune in, like, comment, especially the more subscribers we get on YouTube, the better, the faster we can branch out and kind of start reaching some other people and just keep the Rock Talk conversation going. And we're going to be launching some other talks in the future as well. Actually, later today, I'm going to be filming a teacher talk with some of my fellow teachers at the Academy. So that's going to be fun too. We're going to launch our second episode of that, and many more than that to come. So Jeff,
final thoughts. Listen to what I mentioned as far as the albums of the Big Four. You will not be sorry. They're fantastic. Even the Slayer album, I mentioned that one specifically to you, Danton, because you're saying like Slayer a lot of times, they're a one-note band sometimes, but that album probably has the most varied songs on it. So give Seasons in the Abyss a listen, and that's it. Like and subscribe, and talk to us on our Facebook group, because it's grown. It's been up a couple weeks, and we've got a couple hundred members already, and there's a lot of great conversation going on there. So, till next time.
Jump in, make some new friends, and keep the Rock Talk going. We'll see you next time.